And there is new reporting this morning on what those plans look like. The Washington Post reports that the Pentagon has been planning a military deployment to Chicago for weeks in a model that could later be used in other major cities, according to officials familiar with the plans. It adds that the planning, which has not been previously disclosed, involves several options, including mobilizing at least a few thousand members of the National Guard as soon as September. The Post also reports that the use of thousands of active duty troops in Chicago also has been discussed, but is considered less likely at this time, according to two officials. Overnight, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker said in a statement, "There is no emergency that warrants the President of the United States federalizing the Illinois National Guard, deploying the National Guard from other states, or sending active duty military within our borders." Donald Trump is attempting to manufacture a crisis, politicize Americans who serve in uniform, and continue abusing his power to distract from the pain he is causing working families. On Friday, President Trump indicated that Chicago would be his next target, along with another Democratic-leaning city with a black mayor.
The people in Chicago, Mr. Vice President, are screaming for us to come. They're wearing red hats, just like this one, but they're wearing red hats. African-American ladies, beautiful ladies, are saying, "Please, President Trump, come to Chicago." And so I think Chicago will be our next, and then we'll help with New York.
And joining us now is the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. Mayor Johnson, thank you for coming back to the weekend. Before I get your reaction to the Washington Post reporting and what we just heard in that clip from President Trump, I'm going to play something else President Trump said on Friday with regard to your city.
Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent. And we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this. And it won't even be tough.
Mayor Johnson?
Yes.
Your reaction to what you just heard.
Yeah. Well, listen, the President of the United States of America has repeated this, petulant presentation since he has assumed office. And, if the reporting is actually true, what he is proposing at this point would be the most flagrant violation of our Constitution in the 21st century. The city of Chicago does not need a military occupation. That's not what we need. In fact, we've been very clear about what we need. We need to invest in people to ensure that we can build safe and affordable communities. That's what I've done as mayor since assuming office. It's unfortunate that this president is working overtime to divide in his attempt to conquer working families and to conquer cities across America. But this is clearly a violation of the Constitution, and we're going to remain firm and vigilant in our commitment to ensure that our democracy is protected and our humanity is secured.
Mr. Mayor, it sounded like you said the White House had not been in touch with you at all about this. And I just want to make sure that I heard that right.
That is correct. There has been no formal communications from the Trump administration to my administration. There's been no formal communications from the White House to our governor. At this point, again, this is all, I believe, an attempt to frighten and to raise anxiety across America. Here's what we're doing in Chicago. The fact of the matter is violent crime is actually down in Chicago. We've reduced homicides by almost 32%. Shootings and shooting victims, we've reduced that by nearly 40%. Robberies are down 35%. There is certainly more work to be done, but we are moving towards building the safest, most affordable big city in America. And what the Trump administration is attempting to do is to roll back the hands of time and take us to a time period in which we know from the civil rights era where Dr. King described this type of act as one of the three evils. The militarization of our society is not who we are as a country. And I'm going to remain firm and vigilant to make sure that we're actually doing the work that works. And what we have seen in Chicago, when we invest in people, we drive violence down. whether it's investing in youth employment, investing in affordable homes, and quite frankly, investing in our Detectives Bureau, where we have revamped our entire detectives division to be able to solve violent crime. And we have a clearance rate of almost 77, 76%. And so we're solving crime, we're reducing crime, we're investing in people, and that's what's working for the people of Chicago.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that we've talked about on this show a lot, and that me and Jonathan talk off air about a lot, is that this doesn't appear to be actually about crime. Because the cities that the president has talked about, these major cities, all of that crime has gone down. In Chicago, we have down 13.3% in year-to-date totals, 7.1% down in Washington, D.C., 4.9% in New York compared with last year. It's declining over and over and over again. You see Oakland, Los Angeles, and Baltimore, cities that the president has also talked about. I guess when you're talking about you're going to, you and the governor are going to protect the folks there, make sure that this doesn't happen. What are you guys planning to do? Maybe you don't want to tell us your plan, but folks, I think, watching want to know that there actually is something that folks can do because, you said it's unconstitutional, but we've seen this president ignore many things that folks have said are that weren't constitutional, him going ahead and plowing ahead and doing them anyway.
Yeah, well, again, look, the 10th Amendment is actually quite clear where states reserve rights. And that's something that's an important thing to note. And we will, take up legal action if necessary. Whether it's my Department of Law or working with the governor, we're also in communications with our Cook County Board president. We're all aligned in the city of Chicago. In fact, this is the time for all of us to come together in this moment. And there are some political differences certainly that we do have in Chicago, but I think in this regard, we're all very clear that the Trump administration is clearly in violation of the Constitution. And it's pretty straightforward for us. You either support the Constitution or you do not. Those are the only two positions that you can take. And again, whether it's legal actions, as well as the community as a whole coming together to push back in a very dramatic way against this administration. Because, look, as I said before, we're doing the work here in Chicago, and you mentioned other cities around America, and whether it's, what Brandon Scott is doing, Randa Woodfin is doing in Birmingham, Justin Bibb in Cleveland, my other counterpart, Mayor Johnson in Milwaukee, Karen Bass, Barbara Lee. I mean, these are all strong leaders across this country that have made critical investments in affordable housing, youth employment, mental and behavioral health care services. We are investing in people. And quite frankly, the most vulnerable people. What this president is doing, he's declared a war on poor people. I remember when we had presidents that declared war on poverty. That's the opposite from this administration. Picking on homeless people, picking on the most vulnerable. That is not what the people of Chicago are going to stand for. And so we'll use all means necessary to us to ensure that we protect the Constitution and we protect this beloved city.
Mayor Johnson, actually, I have two questions, struggling with which one to ask you, but I'll start with the more substantive one. Eugene asked you if you had any communication with the White House about the plans that were reported in the Washington Post. I'm wondering, what communications have you had with Governor Pritzker about what is to come, about federal intervention, especially since President Trump has been talking about sending in the military in some form to Chicago since his first run in the office between 2017 and 2021?
Yes, well, the governor and I, we just spoke a couple of days ago. Our teams are in constant communications, as well as with our board president. There's an incredible strong alignment here. And, to the point that I made earlier, the president does not have the constitutional or legal authority to federalize the National Guard here in Illinois. It would be, again, a clear, flagrant violation of the Constitution and federal laws. What we've said here repeatedly, and this is the conversation that the governor and I have on a regular basis, if the president was actually sincere about reducing violence in Chicago or anywhere else in this country, he would not have taken $800 million away from violence prevention dollars. We've seen in his nasty bill where we've seen the largest concentration of wealth placed into the hands of the ultra-rich. It reminds me of, Justice Brandeis, who said, listen, you can either have wealth concentrated into the hands of the few, or you can have a democracy, but you cannot have both. And this president has attacked everything that's sensible about our society. He's taken food away from families. He's taken medicine away from families. He's defunded our education system. That's the opposite, the antithesis to what we're doing here in Chicago, investing in affordable homes, investing in small businesses, making sure that the most vulnerable people have access to high quality education as well as health care, including mental and behavioral health care. So the governor and I have been very clear that not only is he in violation of the Constitution, we have to remain committed to ensuring that we're investing in working families. Look, the National Guard is not going to put food on the table. The National Guard is not going to, reduce unemployment. The National Guard is not going to give people access to health care. This president, of course, has demonstrated that he is inimical to the interests of working people. But here in Chicago, a pro-worker city, a city that said, yes, we can, a city that said, keep hope alive, right? This is the city where resistance came alive. Dr. King said, if we can do it right in Chicago, we can do it anywhere in the world. And that's what we're doing, building safe and affordable communities across Chicago. If the president was sincere about those type of investments, he would not be prancing around the country using unconstitutional means to ultimately extend his authoritarianism rule.
Mr. Mayor, in the time that we have left, I just want to get your reaction to another thing in the Washington Post story, and I'm reading directly here. It says, the use of thousands of active duty troops in Chicago also has been discussed, but is considered less likely at this time. We saw him do that with active duty Marines on the streets of Los Angeles. What would the reaction be in Chicago if the president of the United States does indeed put active duty military on the streets of Chicago?
Well, again, the city of Chicago does not need a military occupied state. That's not who we are. And I commend the work of Mayor Bass, my colleague, and all the folks in Los Angeles who stood up and fought, against this, authoritarianism. Here's the bottom line. They don't have police power. There's nothing they can do. These are federal troops. They do not go through the training that our police officers go through, so they cannot even enact police authority.
But Mayor Johnson, they don't have it now.
The president has, that's a good point, but the president has spent hundreds of millions of dollars to arrest 9 people in D.C. Clearly he's demonstrated that he doesn't have a level of consciousness to understand what it takes to run cities, not to mention an entire country. And so, look, we're going to remain firm. We'll take legal action. But the people of this city are accustomed to rising up against tyranny. And if that's necessary, I believe that the people of Chicago will stand firm alongside of me as I work every single day to protect the people of this city.
But Mayor Johnson, really quickly, I was trying to interject there quickly, but they don't have that power now, right? What we have seen is that this president and the administration are willing to stretch the bounds of everything. And so currently they don't have, policing power, but that may not be true for the foreseeable future. Anything could happen on the streets of Chicago if the president actually indeed puts, as he put it, regular military there.
Well, that's why we're all in lockstep here in the state of Illinois. As I continue to work with the governor, the Cook County Board President, these are strong partners and elected officials, as well as our faith community, our business leaders. Look, the city of Chicago, one of the most diverse economies in the world, right? Again, a city that has been, founded and established on the values of working people. We're not going to surrender our humanity to this tyrant. I can tell you this. The city of Chicago has a long history of standing up against tyranny, resisting those who wish to undermine the interests of working people. We're not going to back down. We're not going to cower. We're not going to bend. We're not going to break. We are Chicago. We are the soul of America, and we will maintain that posture from now until.
Mayor Johnson of Chicago, thank you so much for joining the weekend once again.
Thank you for having me.
The Corporation for Public Broadcasting will be largely shuttered by the end of next month and gone entirely by January. At President Trump's request, Republicans in Congress canceled its federal funding last month, and that spelled the end of the organization's half a century of supporting public radio and television. Now, much has been made of the impact that these cuts are going to have on local news stations, particularly in rural areas. But the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has also played a huge role in supporting high-quality educational programming on PBS, where Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood originated. And where that legacy of iconic educational programming lives on with the Mr. Rogers spinoff, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and programs like Sid the Science Kid and Word Girl. Meanwhile, the White House appears to be eyeing an alternative to these kind of PBS Kids programmings that teach kids social, emotional skills, science readiness, and literacy. PragerU is an unaccredited, non-professional organization founded by conservative talk show host Dennis Prager in 2009. It specializes in creating right-leaning, short educational videos for children and adults, but don't mistake it for a university despite its name. The organization does little to hide its intent to indoctrinate children with right-wing ideology, and on the bottom of its website, you can find the following disclaimer, quote, PragerU is not an accredited university, nor do we claim to be. We don't offer degrees, but we do provide educational, entertaining, pro-American videos for every age, end quote. According to Vox, in July, the White House debuted an educational partnership with PragerU at a launch event for a new museum exhibit. Now, the thing about PBS and PBS Kids, which made parents trust their programs, is the fact that education professionals and early childhood development specialists played a vital role in producing and developing them. Sesame Street, in particular, was designed to help low-income and minority students aged 2 to 5 overcome some of the disadvantages that they traditionally had when entering school. In fact, a 2016 study found that children in households who were exposed to Sesame Street were 14% more likely to be enrolled at the correct grade level for their age at middle and high school. So to put it simply, PBS Kids is programming in the public interest. It's improving society while your kids are watching TV and you're off doing something like washing the dishes. The payoff may not be immediate, but the impact is long-lasting. PragerU's content is already being deployed in 10 states across America, including Florida, Arizona, and Louisiana. These partnerships allow PragerU's materials to be used in public school curricula while not mandating it. But one of PragerU's most loyal supporters happens to be the state currently ranked 50th in education, Oklahoma. This week, Oklahoma announced it will require teachers from New York and California to pass an America First test designed by PragerU before being hired in the state. The state's public school superintendent said the test is an effort to root out, quote, radical leftist ideology from classrooms and warned that Connecticut, Illinois, Minnesota, and others could soon join the list. So what's so concerning about PragerU finding champions in the White House and in other states? I'm going to let you be the judge.
The southern colonies were dependent on slave labor, and they wouldn't have joined a union that had banned it.
Are you okay with that?
I'm certainly not okay with slavery, but the Founding Fathers made a compromise to achieve something great, the making of the United States.
Most gender stereotypes exist because they reflect the way that men and women are naturally different.
One of the most beautiful things God has created is a woman's smile. It can fill a room with energy and joy. Just try smiling and see how it affects the people around you.
Chicago is a bustling metropolis famous for food, fun, and an iconic skyline. But beneath those tall buildings, Chicago has a dark side and a long history of crime, poverty, and low-performing schools.
Slavery is as old as time and has taken place in every corner of the world, even amongst the people I just left. Being taken as a slave is better than being killed, no? I don't see the problem.
I don't see the problem. Wow. That's what some children in America are learning. I'm joined now by the Democratic State Representative of Oklahoma, John Waldron. Before entering the political arena, Representative Waldron was a social studies teacher in the Tulsa Public School District. I'm also here with my colleague, Antonia Hilton, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend Primetime, author of Madness, Race and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum, a remarkably important book. I had to ask my producers several times about those PragerU videos to make sure we weren't being punked. I had to ask them, is that real stuff that is being shown to kids in America to teach them in lieu of PBS?
It is. In fact, Allie, just last weekend on our show, we had an educator who's also a state representative in Oklahoma named Gabe Wolion. He has used PragerU content in the classroom. So if you're wondering if the video you're showing right there, this, retelling of slavery from Christopher Columbus's point of view, what you heard from fake Frederick Douglass there, if that's actually been used in the classroom, I have met educators who have started to integrate this kind of stuff with young children. And I want to point out one thing, because a lot of people have paid attention to that Christopher Columbus clip where he says, that being taken as a slave is better than being killed, and he doesn't see a problem. Not only is that an opinion and a sort of form of propaganda to put in front of children, but actually primary source documents from slaves themselves that educators across the country have access to completely undermine that. People who were enslaved spoke very often about the fact that they were willing to put their lives at risk, willing to die in order to escape plantations in the South. Frederick Douglass, in fact, attempted multiple escapes, and he famously got engaged in a physical altercation with a notorious slave breaker who was trying to dominate and harm him. And fighting back when you are an enslaved person is something that, again, they knew could end their lives.
Yep.
And so it's actually not just a little wrong, it is really insidious. And I say that as a journalist who's covered this, that simply the facts, the records, primary and secondary source documents that we've had access to for many years in this country go against so much of the programming that is getting in front of children. When I've spoken to educators about why they would use this, they say, well, it's about alternative perspectives, or, some of the documents we have are liberal perspectives, and this is a conservative one. But it's really not that. There's the truth, there's the reality of what slavery represented to the United States, and then there seems to be this major push that's been gaining steam for years now to recast the entire American story, to resist feeling guilt about what happened and what was a central part of our founding. And it's really alarming for the educators who are being pushed to use this stuff, for the parents who are finding out their kids are exposed to it. And it's having a real impact. You just spelled out it's in 10 states already, but I've spoken to Dennis Prager. I know their team. I've visited their headquarters in California. They have a 50-state strategy.
Yeah. Oklahoma's got real issues in terms of education. I mean, it's not that people in Oklahoma shouldn't be completely invested in improving public education on every level. If Oklahoma's got the education rankings it's got, it would sound like that's an all-of-government effort to fix that, not this.
Correct. And I want to point out that I actually was born and raised in New Jersey and moved to Oklahoma 25 years ago. I taught for 20 years at Booker T. Washington High School, go Hornets, and it's a great school. But under Republican leadership, we have fallen down to 50th from 17th in the nation. And I think that's a more important conversation to have.
Talk to me about how this goes in Oklahoma. How is this unfolding?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that we do have an excellent public television network in Oklahoma. OETA is very popular and has a lot of public support. And if we replace that kind of content with clearly indoctrinatory material from out-of-state vendors, I think the taxpayers of Oklahoma have a good question to ask about that. And the parents of the 700,000 kids in Oklahoma public schools should be wondering whether this is a policy that really is designed to serve the best interest of the kids. I firmly believe as a classroom teacher that it's not our job to teach students what to think, but to show them how to think for themselves.
Antonia, PragerU's CEO responded to that Christopher Columbus video they put out. Here's what she had to say. She said, "We basically paraphrased what he, meaning Christopher Columbus, would have said to two young kids. And from Christopher Columbus's perspective, he probably thought that slavery was okay because that's what he did. And so because we had the cartoon Christopher Columbus say, 'Oh, I think slavery is okay,' and then the kids responded back to him in this show that we made, 'Well, slavery is actually abhorrent. It's a horrible thing.' That's why we're being attacked, because we were paraphrasing what Christopher Columbus would have said." Talk to me a little about that unusual response.
Yeah, I think I've met the CEO. I've sat down with Dennis Prager as part of a Meet the Press mini documentary that I worked on through NBC just a little over a year ago. And so I'm aware of their response because I showed them a lot of their own content to get an understanding about the strategy here. And I think what always kind of allows them to relieve themselves of responsibility is that this is edutainment, is a word that often their team uses. They always say it's sort of supplemental, this is just another tool to use along with all kinds of other sources. But the reality is if you're putting a video like that in front of children who are 5, 6, 8, 10 years old, they're going to look at Christopher Columbus, the adult in the room in that video, and see him as an authority figure. I mean, he's a figure who's still celebrated throughout much of the United States. Kids learn about him. He's seen as important, whether you like him or not. And so to hear him describe the institution of slavery in a particular way, that's going to be an opinion that carries a lot of weight, maybe more weight than a young child who's depicted in the video. Because the purpose of that video series is they have these two children who go back in time and they meet figures like Frederick Douglass and Christopher Columbus, and they engage in conversations with them. But the whole point is we're young kids trying to learn about the world. So you're meeting these people who are going to teach you about the world. And so that kind of creates a framework of legitimacy there. And that's where, for the educators that I speak to, the concern comes in, that kids are going to hear what Christopher Columbus says there and believe that that is a fact. Oh, slaves must have preferred being slaves to losing their lives. When, again, that is simply not just kind of untrue or debatable, but goes against everything we know about the lengths at which people went to free themselves, to find freedom across the United States. And so, again, the question is, how is this being integrated into the classroom? How are teachers framing this when they show it to students? And from what I've seen, they're often pulling it up, showing it as sort of part of a lesson on American history. And they're not explaining, and they're not giving the statement you just heard from the CEO there. That's lacking. And so the video is what it is, and it's presented as fact to kids when they're coming across it in schools, on YouTube, or wherever else they come across PragerU.
Oklahoma curriculum should be written by Oklahoma educators to meet the needs of our school children. We don't need PragerU to come in and tell us how to teach our kids. And yet this state superintendent, who acts like he's auditioning for some other job, has been using this out-of-state company to put his own message into our classrooms. And I don't think that's fair. I also want to point out that we're in the middle of a massive teacher shortage in Oklahoma. And to provide this kind of ideological screening makes no sense.
Thanks to both of you this morning. I appreciate it.
Can I add one thing to that? Yeah. Which is the other piece of this has been the argument that this is supplemental. This is just another tool in your toolkit. But PragerU is behind the quiz that you described that teachers from New York and California are going to have to take in order to prove that they're not woke and undeserving of being educators in the state of Oklahoma. So that means PragerU is not supplemental. They're actually directly intervening in the approval, the sort of certification process for someone to be able to be an educator in one of our 50 states.
But we begin this hour with the oath of office required for most federal employees. It specifies that an individual does solemnly swear that they will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and will bear allegiance to that Constitution. Note that it does not require one to, support and defend the president or swear allegiance to him. But in Donald Trump's America, it seems that is what is expected. You're either with him or you are against him. And we've seen what happens when you are seen as being against him. Perhaps you will have the Justice Department or FBI come knocking at your door, as in the case of Trump's former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, who is now a prominent Trump critic. Sources tell NBC News the search was focused on classified records. But it is difficult to separate the actions from the words of a president who ran on a promise of revenge. Joining us now, Skye Perryman, president and CEO of Democracy Forward, and Ankush Khardori, former federal prosecutor and Politico magazine senior writer. I want to start there, Ankush. The inability, I guess, for all of us to separate what the president said, what he ran on, and the actions that they're doing. And when you think about what you saw on Friday, when you think about the fact that the FBI, the now FBI director, wrote a book where he had an actual enemies list that he wrote down, what does that tell you about what we should be kind of girding ourselves for?
Well, we should be skeptical and maintain an open mind. And there are a couple of rules that I actually, tried to abide by during the Trump investigations and prosecutions that I thought were helpful. One, keep an open mind and maintain a healthy dose of skepticism.
We got that in doses here.
And two, take it one step at a time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We know what we know right now. We don't know how the story ends.
We haven't seen the affidavit. We haven't seen the search warrant.
Correct. And it's helpful to, I think, to sort of keep another distinction in mind, which is it can be the case that an investigation or prosecution has improper motives, maybe even corrupt or unfair motives, and also that the prosecution ends up being justified by the facts and the evidence and the law. These things can both be true. So it doesn't mean that they're entirely distinct. You can judge the quality of the evidence in the context of the motives of bringing it, but you have to keep those things separate. Right now, we know very little about what happened. John Bolton, I understand, in some quarters, particularly since he took his turn against Trump, he's become more of a figure, a more prominent figure. But this is not a person who's served his country well, I would say, if you know the full sweep of his career. If anyone doesn't, go to the Wikipedia page of the George W. Bush administration section on Mr. Bolton's page. And you'll learn a lot of interesting things that will make you, I think, a little less sympathetic.
Wow.
I'm going to have to come back to that. But Sky, I take what Ankush said, but as he was speaking, I keep thinking, you can't completely dismiss the revenge and retribution motive of the president, especially when we have him on tape, recordings, video, using those very words. Watch this.
In 2016, I declared, I am your voice. Today I add, I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
And the first time I had it, but you guys were after me. I said I had to focus. I was the hunted, and now I'm the hunter. It's a big difference.
And Sky, that is the big line to me. I was the hunted, and now I'm the hunter. It's a big difference. Why shouldn't the American people view what happened to Ambassador Bolton and a slew of other government officials as retribution or revenge?
Look, I think that what's been said here is exactly right. The American people should be very concerned about a president and his associates, right? The FBI director and others that have made it clear and have gloated about their desire to engage in retribution against perceived political enemies. And at the same time, as citizens, we need to understand more about what's going on here. But that does not erase the concerns that we should have about the president's approach. Also, what happened this week, and it didn't make big headlines, is that the administration again pulled security clearances from people who are career civil servants who have done nothing other than swear that oath that you put up on the screen, an oath to the Constitution. And that is landing people that have dedicated their entire career, right, to the American people and to our Constitution in hot water with this president. So we do know that he has a retribution agenda. And then at the same time, when we look at this particular instance, I think we do need to learn more. But that should not erase the concerns that every American at this point, these are too big of concerns for people to think it won't happen to them, that it won't affect them. Every American should be concerned and should be pushing back.
We can have both of those things in our head at the same time. I want to read from this Atlantic headline that I think was written by Shane Harris. The Bolton raid feels like a warning. Quote, Purge doesn't adequately capture what national security experts see happening here. Chilling effect is too mild, though revoking the security clearances of 2 senior intelligence officers, as Gabbard did, effectively ending their government careers will indeed send a message. Terrorizing the workforce is a phrase I heard a lot this week, and that may indeed be the point. As a former DOJ official, as a former federal prosecutor, what does this do to morale in the DOJ? And more importantly, how does that I assume makes it low. Yeah. And how does that lower morale impact the ability of the agency to accomplish its mission?
Well, that is the critical question here. Is this going to deter people from undertaking investigations or pursuing prosecutions that they should be doing under normal circumstances? And now they might not, because they're afraid that they'll be punished by the sitting administration or maybe even a future administration. And I think the point that Skye made there was very, very important, because we, as long as this talk has been going on during the 2024 campaign, Trump talked about it all the time, the revenge tour that was going to happen. To my mind, the people who we know, the more prominent media figures and more political figures, are in some ways the people we should be least concerned about. It's the people we don't know, the people whose names we don't immediately
recognize. They have less access to resources and money.
Right, who don't have access to the media, money to defend themselves, who are losing their jobs and their careers and their livelihoods, even though they have families. I mean, there are many, many stories. I'm sure you've been talking about them and have seen and heard them of regular career people who have just been handed a notice saying you're out of a job, and they have a family and kids, and then they're left adrift.
And
go ahead, Skye.
I was just going to say, and I think that this is something we want every single American to focus on, because when we talk about patriotism, when we talk about the love for this country, right, these are the men and women and people that have been fighting for our country in uncelebrated ways throughout our national security teams, at the Department of Justice, at intelligence agencies, and they are being targeted by this administration, and that is going to make the United States less safe. It is going to make every single American less safe. And I think that needs a lot more attention than what it's getting right now.
Ankush, there is a story in the AP, we're switching gears slightly here. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, a Senate hopeful, claimed 3 homes as his primary residence. Now, I bring that up because this week we have heard all sorts of claims of mortgage fraud against the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, against Senator Adam Schiff, and now against Governor of the Federal Reserve, Lisa Cook. What's up with mortgage fraud? That seems to be the go-to thing to sort of muddy up someone's either their reputation or muddy them up legally.
Because maybe we shouldn't be buying any house.
I know.
Look, it seems to be the case that someone in the administration or around the administration had the idea of going and scouring a bunch of people's mortgage applications. They're complex documents. They're not even entirely, it's not even necessarily you who's doing all the writing. You sign it, there are discrepancies. And so anytime you have a discrepancy, if you're really superficial about it, you can say, oh, this might be fraud. In fact, mortgage fraud cases are typically not brought in the context on the facts that they've so far released. This, too, is another very helpful distinction to keep in mind, because the mortgage fraud allegations I put in a slightly different category because they appear on their face to be so weak and contrived. The Bolton investigation, right? And I think anything involving classified documents, whether it concerns Bolton or perhaps Miles Taylor, I would be more concerned for those people.
Right.
If I were them, I'd be more concerned.
I should also point out that the Trump Justice Department doesn't seem to be looking at the Texas Attorney General in his mortgage problems with 3 homes as primary residences.
Just good reporting. I want to pull up some headlines for you, Skye, of Trump's retributive actions this week. And you brought up the Gabbard revoking security clearances of 37 intel officials who allegedly abused public trust. There's obviously the John Bolton home search, but also Hegseth firing the general whose agency's intel assessment of damage from Iran strikes angered Trump. It feels like I don't know, whole of government, which is not usually how we use that term, but whole of government approach to making sure that Donald Trump is happy. And that's not usually how the government operates. So talk about your concerns, because I know you have them, about the entire government being solely focused on making sure that one man is seemingly happy.
Well, it's simply not how it's supposed to work. And there is nothing that I have not found a person living in any place in the United States whose life has gotten better since Donald Trump has gotten into office. This administration has been cutting essential benefits for people, and then at the same time engaging in, frankly, small, petty, but very scary and intimidating retribution tactics. And that is weakening our government. It's weakening the ability of the government to serve the people. And on the national security front, again, this should concern everybody, regardless of what your political beliefs are. This is a 5-alarm fire because it's going to make us less safe if people are not speaking truth to the president and providing accurate intelligence assessments and doing their job that they have to do consistent with their obligations to the Constitution and the American people. And this president doesn't have room for those people in his government.
We have late breaking news tonight that National Guard troops here in Washington will be armed beginning this evening. Joining me now is Congresswoman Lateefah Simon, Democrat of California. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us tonight. The president appears to be expanding his crackdowns on American cities with black mayors and large non-white populations. First was L.A., then Washington, D.C. Now there's the Washington Post reporting that Chicago is next. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is out with a statement this afternoon saying the city is evaluating all its legal options to protect citizens from federal overreach. Here's Mayor Johnson on MSNBC this morning.
What he is proposing at this point would be the most flagrant violation of our Constitution in the 21st century. The city of Chicago does not need a military occupation. We're going to remain firm and vigilant in our commitment to ensure that our democracy is protected and our humanity is secured.
What's your reaction to this latest development, Congresswoman?
You know, I am the granddaughter of a vet. My grandfather, God rest his soul, survived the explosion of Port Chicago. I recall him talking about the days in uniform as a black soldier. Our soldiers deserve better than this. Our president is sending out men and women who have taken an oath to protect this country, not be in a situation where they're going against their own citizens. It's flagrant disrespect to local and state government. When the president of the United States makes a declaration of invading cities, again, we know that we're in trouble. Oakland, California is the city that I represent, and I want to tell you clearly, these cities have not requested support from the federal government in this manner. What we have requested is that the DOJ stopped defunding our programs in our cities to keep folks safe. We are asking the administration to fund Head Start. We're asking them to not cut SNAP. So again, this is foolery. If you cared about safety, you would let folks govern and provide resources for communities to do their best work. Again, this is authoritarianism at its finest.
And many of these cities, the crime rate has actually gone down, but I'll get to that later. Chicago's not the only black-led city in Trump's sights this weekend. He also criticized Baltimore for its crime rate, which has gone down. And this morning, he went after Maryland's black Democratic governor, Wes Moore, for daring him to walk the streets of Baltimore after the president threatened to crack down on the city over its crime rate. Trump threatened to, quote, send the troops in, as he has in Washington, and to withhold congressionally approved funding for their repair of the Key Bridge in Baltimore, because, you know, America first. And he followed up by questioning whether Governor Moore, a combat veteran who received a Bronze Star last year, lied about receiving the distinction. What's your take on Trump's attacks, Congresswoman?
I want to make very clear, as a new member of Congress in the last 8 months, I have been front witness to the assault on the American people by this administration. First and foremost, you have the President of the United States threatening city mayors who are hell-bent, these mayors, on making their cities and communities safer. These same mayors have stood shoulder to shoulder demanding that the administration do what they should be doing in terms of funding resources and programs that keep people fed, ensure that folks have health care when they need it. This isn't about safety. This is about control. If the United States wanted safer cities, we would provide the mechanisms for those safer cities. I got to tell you, Mr. Governor Moore is a fantastic leader who has said time and time again that to create safety means children need to go to school with full bellies, and teachers should be paid what they deserve, and that our streets should be paved with resources for community members. The Trump administration is slashing those very, very benefits. They don't care about safety. This is an attack on Black cities. The last thing I'd like to say to this question, Reverend Sharpton, is the administration is spending billions of dollars to attack immigrant communities, to completely go against what is written and promised in our Constitution for persons who are in this United States. And now he's waging a war on Black cities and Black men in particular. Listen, half of my time I'm in Washington, D.C. I left to come back to my district to do work. And on the way to the airport, I saw tanks coming into Washington, D.C. This is where we are, sir. And we have to stand strong. We have to stand strong and saying, this is not what we've asked for. We've asked for an administration that cares for its people.
Now, you mentioned it earlier. You represent the Bay Area, which has also been targeted by Trump as he vows to expand his crackdown nationwide. He's hinted that he may send National Guard troops to San Francisco to, quote, clean that one up too, end of quote. And he's listed Oakland as, quote, being too far gone. The mayors of both cities, Daniel Lurie and Barbara Lee, have rejected Trump's threats. We've already seen how this played out in Los Angeles. Why would any other city in California want to experience the same thing?
You know, when the President of the United States tells our National Guard to go into cities and hassle and push homeless people to a point literally of distinction, what the president should be doing is working in cooperation with these mayors and our governors and saying, what will it take to get treatment on demand for folks who are suffering from addiction? What would it take, and how can we support you in ensuring that these folks have shelter beds and long-term care? We, in fact, have an administration that is cutting the safety net into pieces in real time. Again, I want to say, this is not about safety. This is about control. This is about the president of the United States, and all of his appointees defying the promise of the Constitution. The overreach is intolerable. My mayor, Barbara Lee, has worked with numerous communities within Oakland in her 8 short months to reduce crime by 30%. And we understand that victims of violent crime deserve better. What they do not need is, again, a militarized city that could, in fact, infringe on their own rights. No one's asking for that.